Hello and welcome to Exchanges for another week. Social entrepreneurialism. What is it? And why do people engage in what is not just an economic decision, it's a life decision, and a beautiful life decision is that. Because if you can develop an entrepreneurial system that gives back, what a way to be part of the community. And that's why I wanted to get in somebody that is absolutely committed to being a social entrepreneur that contributes so much to society with everything that he does. Andy Fithall is that person, and he is a standout performer in this space, and he's got an incredible story to explain to you why he's gone down the social entrepreneurial system and just how he uses it to the betterment of the community. So without any further ado, here is Andy. Andy Fithall, welcome to Exchanges.
Thank you so much, Evan, for having me on.
Yeah, I've been, when we actually sort of, came across each other, it was at a Hope Fund, which is a charity that you and I are very close to, have very good relationships with. And what I wanted to get you on to here to talk to a lot of listeners about is your world of social entrepreneurialism. First, define that for me, because I think it's a fascinating topic that's sometimes completely missed.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting even phrase. A lot of people don't understand what the phrase is and get a little bit
hmm
confused when you describe yourself as a social entrepreneur. Probably the easiest way for me to describe it would be to say that I founded a social enterprise, and that kind of makes it make more sense. So then you say, well, what's a social enterprise? Well, technically, it's something that donates a large portion of its profits. Um, it's not a charity or a non-for-profit, but it is something that has good in mind
hmm
with the work that it does. And that basically sums up what I do with the Good Machine, which is my social enterprise.
Yeah, I'll come to the good machine because this is your whole sort of sphere and world. Because
Mm.
obviously goes through so many different sort of entities that you do. Your coffee and everything else.
Yeah,
I'll come back to that because I really want to get into your coffee particularly.
yeah.
But just go a little bit further on that. Before we came on, we were talking about sort of ways to define it. You talked about it in currency. I talk about it in value. Can you take through why you talk about value, you talk about transfer of social good
Yeah.
through a currency rather than just looking at it from a very clinical, capital only view.
Yeah. Well, I've had roles in the past, sales roles, where the mantra or the motto of the team was sell heaps, move lots of units, and the KPIs were just around moving boxes. And the
Mhm.
question is, why? Well, because we want that trend, we want that growth, and that's good. And so you get stuck in that, like, well, if we don't sell more stuff, then that's bad. But I became very aware, I guess, inside myself that wasn't really for me, that idea. Like, sure, selling lots of stuff is important for your business if you sell things, but that isn't for me. That wasn't a driver. It wasn't sort of what got me out of bed in the morning. If you're selling things for a reason, because that sale will help do some good in the world, then for me, that actually I've found was what really got me going. So we talk about value and currency, and I've always, well, especially in the last few years, but it's become really clear to me that currency, like we use cash as currency, as a transfer of value between parties. So,
Mhm.
but inherently, that cash isn't worth, like the materials now in our cash is not worth the value we assign to it. So, but I say that the other currencies out there, I sell coffee. Coffee is a currency. People use coffee as a way to get people together, to have conversations. I mean, it played a huge role in the American Civil War. They were bootlegging coffee from all of, across blockades and stuff like that, because it was a morale booster. So
Mhm.
we talk about what things have a currency. It's the things that we actually need as human beings, which is not just financial worth or stability or whatever. It's all of the other things that go with it that actually make you feel good. And so that to me is what the other currencies, the unknown, some are named and some aren't, but there's lots of currencies, I believe.
Yeah, and so do I. And that's again when we were sort of talking at the Hope Fund. That's sort of very much what I identify with what you're alluding to because I talk about it in terms of value, as I said at the start, which is value isn't just capital. Value is time. Value is effort. Value is belief. value is emotion as well as the capital side to it. And
Mm.
you're right. I mean, that's why let's jump into it. I mean, I can't go past it because I've been trying your coffee and it's absolutely Groundhog Day and what is going on with Groundhog Day. Beautiful coffee that you've got there. But as you said, it's a currency of exchange, right? So coffee is a product that I don't know about you, but I absolutely love. But it's
Yeah.
also about the fact that it brings people together. It allows, as you said, those conversations to happen. The amount of I don't know about you, but business, social, and professional development I've had over a cup of coffee
Yep.
has been second to no other exchange I've ever had. Is that how and what you view your grind day around and what you do with Groundhog? Why coffee is so important to your social entrepreneurial belief?
Yeah, well, so I guess, and it does weave into our story. So I have a history with coffee. It's not like I haven't been a business before this to do with coffee, but I've worked for a friend who was really into his coffee years ago. I started my own coffee journey years ago. So by the time that this came around, I was very much both addicted and I just, I'm a bit of a snob, lover of coffee. Um, and I
You're from
was,
Melbourne. What
yeah,
do you
I've got,
expect?
well, of course, yeah. And so this is, for me, it was an easy one because coffee is both something that is considered in a workplace essential, tea and coffee must be supplied in a workplace. So it's considered essential on various levels, but it's also something that a lot of people just weave into their daily life. And so this idea of creating something that is both valuable as far as, on a day to day basis, this is something that I have every day, but also just by doing that, just by buying that coffee or drinking that coffee, I'm also doing some good in the world. And so it was an easy one for me because I already liked coffee and I was able to use something that I liked to help generate revenue, which I could then use to do some good.
So that becomes the next part of the conversation. You've already alluded to what you do in social entrepreneurialism, which is that you use, a majority of the profits to go into the social side.
Yeah.
First, how do you benefit that tension between, making sure there's a bit of a turnover to actually keep the business going,
Yep.
but also then what you do with that profit into society? What do you do with that in terms of that capital that you gain through your coffee business?
Yeah. So, I mean, It's it's great for marketing to say we give to charity with our product, which is great. So Groundhog Day has always donated a portion of its profits to food bank. And
Hmm.
so as a result, since we started, we've created over 65,000 meals. It'd be more than that now, but that's the last milestone. But 65,000 meals have been created for vulnerable families in Victoria. And that's just, that's literally just from people sipping coffee. And so that feels great, So, um, I would say for me, like, I'm probably too generous with my business model. Like, I should probably wind that back now as I grow because of cost of living increases and, like all
Hmm.
the cost of business increases. So
Yep.
we should probably be a bit more careful with that now. But because of the impact we're making, it feels so good that you're sort of like, oh, the tension for me is how do I balance that feeling of winding that back with the outlook of, well, I want the business to be able to grow further, to have more impact. And where's the balance point between margins and charities and and donations. So
Hmm.
how do I juggle that? So that
Hmm.
for me is probably the bigger challenge for growth is balancing the charitable element with the margins. Yeah.
Do you also integrate sort of your relationship with Food Bank, for instance, with the patrons that use it into your business? Do you actually sort of go them through apprenticeships and sort of take them through the daily day movements of organizing a business that is clearly got reasonable amount of parts, roasting, sourcing, invoicing, etc. Is that also part of your social entrepreneurialism?
A little bit. We try to share what Food Bank do regularly as part of our socials. So we say that, because at the moment they need something like 69,000 meals per day to
Hmm.
operate, and so I told you our number of 65,000 plus. We haven't reached 1 day's worth of meals on the current demand of our
Yep.
5 years or whatever of operating. But because we are a small team, we don't sort of have, we've been down there, our small team's been down there and seen the operations of Food Bank, if that's what you're alluding to. And yeah, like I say, we try and share what they do, to allow our supporters to see where that's going as well. So to help reinforce the message that, what you're doing is good, and it is directly transferring to down to food bank.
I then need to flip to your other side of your social entrepreneurial
Mm.
side, which is your media and your podcast yourself. So take me through about what and why you brought about In Other Good News, how it came about, what you do with it, and the drive that came from actually creating that sort of podcast, but now become almost a community.
Yeah, well, we have to go back to a period that no one really wants to remember, which is which is the start of 2020, and I was employed at a business which, unfortunately, due to the bushfires, was crippled, and
Mhm.
so we basically at the start of 2020 were told that uh, we're no longer going to have work, and so that was a big deal. I'd been there for a few years, and so that was fine. The job market was good at the time, but then I found another role, and by the time I started at the start of March, I was only there 3 weeks before COVID had come, and COVID came and took jobs as well. So
Yep.
I suffered my second redundancy in the year by the 20th of March, and I guess at that point there, it wasn't as, a nice an outlook, it was a bit bleak, and I realized that the school was talking about they were gonna be closing early because 'cause we're talking about, like, things were starting to scale up as far as social distancing and group gatherings, and so it became quite obvious that it was gonna be difficult for me to go and get a job somewhere,
Mhm.
and I remember when the day I was laid off, I came home, and I was feeling very much what you would describe as the black dog.
Mhm.
I was out of sorts and I was depressed and was extremely anxious about what I was going to do. Fortunately, in some ways, I'd been living in an environment, entrepreneurial environment, with my old workplace where we were, every day could be your last because it's a startup type situation and you sort of are expecting that if things don't go well, then it's going to end. And so you sort of always have that in the back of your mind that things could end. And if it does, what are you going to do? And somewhere I flipped that switch that afternoon and started thinking about, well, what am I going to do now? And I figured that there's gonna be a lot of people who are feeling like I was feeling, and there was a lot of people losing jobs, and I thought, "Well, let's change that energy into instead of finding something just for me, why don't I turn my attention to the community and try and lift other people at the same time?" It would be beneficial for me, selfishly, to be doing something, and otherwise I would have, vegetated on the couch and felt sorry for myself. So I was like, stay on your feet, start something new, get going, and so I pitched the idea to my children the next morning of a good news show.
Mhm.
And the good news show, I said we should call it In Other Good News, and it should just feature good news stories because all that's on the news at the moment is doom and gloom
Right. Yep.
and COVID numbers and what is this thing and is it dangerous and so we did, and by Sunday night, so that's 2 days later, the 22nd of March in 2020, we broadcast our first episode of In Other Good News, and it was a low budget, cheesy thing where my 8-year-old was my co-host and my 6-year-old was working the buttons, and we yeah just started broadcasting local good news stories, which were everything from I painted a pretty picture on the footpath to someone's missing dog came home to, that sort of stuff. Really grassroots, neighborhood, local stuff. And that, surprisingly, just sort of got a bit of a following. And then we kept going through most of the first lockdown and building that thing, and then we just started thinking, like, how else can we use this? So we started doing, like, coffee carts on the front driveway, just on the roadside where people were walking past and just offering free coffee, making coffee out the front. And so In Other Good News started turning from a good news show into a social enterprise naturally just
Mm.
because it felt good. We were seeing impact. And so that's where it sort of came from, and then we finished that first lockdown period with a telethon, and it was called Funkin' for Food Bank, and we decided to play some music live on a live stream, get people to tune in, make donations to Food Bank as part of it, and We raised $6,000 in a 1 hour telethon, and we had some celebrities guest hosting, and we had the mayor and all, politicians come down and say a few words and whatever. So, and that went really well. And so by the second wave, when we were hitting the second wave again, we said, well, In Other Good News needs to fire up. It needs to do more things. How can we raise money ongoing for Food Bank, because they really need it, because they suffered through bushfires into COVID and they were just getting slammed. So how can we keep raising money for them ongoing? But also we need some revenue to do these activities, because we have to pay for software and equipment and all the parts. So I said, I know coffee. I love coffee. We've already connected with someone to help us with coffee on the driveway. So why don't we see if they'll make a blend with us, and we can use that as a tool to do that ongoing. So that is 5 years ago, that part of it. And we just blended those activities. So we sold coffee, plus we did our show. And then from there, it just started sort of stretching out. And I started meeting some amazing people, because it's amazing once you get into this space, how many good people you end up meeting who don't get anywhere near enough publicity. They sit sort of back, because it's the doom and gloom and the stuff that makes your ears prick, which is the bad news that
The
makes,
fight or flight stuff that catches all human beings.
yeah, radio, TV, whatever. That's what gets the publicity. Other people don't. The good people of the world aren't getting it. So that's what we started doing. Then I turned it into a podcast called the Good People Podcast, where I'd interview people doing good in the world and amplify their stories. And then we've continued with other activities. We still do our coffee. We've just recently changed the name from In Other Good News to The Good Machine.
Mhm.
And that mainly is because the name In Other Good News was never made to be a social enterprise. It was just our cheeky little good news show that we started, and we needed something that represented us as a social enterprise better, which is everything we create has an element of good about it.
Yeah. So my question's twofold. You talked about that flip
Mm.
between where it was obviously something that you dreamt up in 48 hours and was clearly a way to deal with a coping mechanism with your situation,
Mm.
to then growing to a level that you got the point where you realize, actually, I need to actually start to invest in this, because I can see, looking at you and me right now, you've clearly invested in your podcast studio and all that kind of stuff. And then the final part of that is now going to the Good Machine. It's clearly got to a level of brand and to a level of reach that it's not just about the podcast, it's about everything that you do in your social entrepreneurial system.
Yep.
Talk to me, because there's two parts to that question.
Mm.
Talk me through the mental side, obviously having to go from the point of view, oh, I need to actually start thinking this as a, not necessarily a non-for-profit, but a social profit business.
Yep.
And then also, you've clearly now got employees, right? Well, volunteers that are bordering on employees, and how you deal with all of those kinds of changes from what was a grassroots program, which is beautiful, to now a program that is, people rely on your program, and how you deal with what you do.
Yeah. Look, in essence, I just loved the space of,
Mhm.
once I found that I could put my energy into something, and I found that I became energized by doing it. So it was great for me personally to do this, because I was realizing shifting boxes and having like a motto of sell heaps only gets it. That, to me, that's why people say TGIF, because they get to Friday and they stop having to think, how many units have I sold, with no real meaning in the world. My week doesn't really end on a Friday. My week is just whenever I talk to someone, which is constantly, whatever I'm doing, and it just changes there's a big blend, I guess, which is a little bit dangerous between vocation and, time off. But the driver for me around all of this is the feeling that I get when you know that what you've just done has helped someone else out. And so, and I think I probably need a prompting on your question again, because
So
I've just got
yeah, yeah. So
distracted.
oh no, no, you're doing it exactly as I was asking, which is now with like the Good Machine,
Yeah,
right? So the machine is now
yeah.
the whole entrepreneurial inverted commas
Yeah, it's the parent.
enterprise.
It's the new parent. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the parent. How you're, both making sure that vocation stays, that drive, that good value will that you get from doing what you're doing with the Good News Project and what you've done with coffee, etc.,
Mm.
keeps going, but also balancing the fact that you now have an enterprise, social enterprise as it is, that has people relying on you in
Mm.
terms of provision, how you've actually dealt with that, and B, is that giving you that value even more now that your thought process that was forced on you because of COVID and because of a horrible bushfire has now turned into something that is not just beautiful for the community, but
Yeah.
actually has a level of purpose that is self-generating.
Yeah, well, the key thing is, and like, I guess the motto of the Good Machine is everything we create has an element of good about it, and that just comes from the values that sort of started it. I don't ever want to just make something that's pure purpose is just profit.
Mhm.
Um, so for me, as we've expanded into the Good Machine, what and it's
Mm.
it's very slow because it is, there's a lot of capital that you need to do a lot of this stuff. So we are slow and steady, but the whole idea is that we can separate things out. They can become their own entities. They can be found for what they are on the internet better. Coffee now is it's its own coffee thing. It's not what is this business. So a lot of it was separating out so people could understand what it is that we do. It was getting too complex.
Uh-huh.
Um, that's a lot easier now, and the whole idea is now that these things can be focused on individually to help them grow, to help them sustain things, and so now we're talking about, introducing help from people who are better at doing this sort of stuff. So, um, better techniques financially for dealing with all of the elements of business that mean that we can both do things a bit cheaper, or we can increase the profits to help us do more later. So I guess my next period is actually just helping the Good Machine establish itself as its own new entity, and to separate out all the parts so that those have a chance to thrive individually, and they all should do their things separately. But um, yeah, as a whole, as a parent, that's the whole thing, is that everything has an element of good. That the what it does changes and what we offer changes, but ultimately, as long as it's doing something good and it can sustain itself, then we're doing the right thing.
So you've sort of semi-asked my next question, but I'm going to ask anyway. What does the next 10 years look like for your vision of A, social entrepreneurship,
Mm.
and B, the Good Machine? And what might be different over those 10 years?
Yeah, well, the filter that we've recently put on, which is it doesn't matter what we create as long as it has an element of good about it, has helped so much, because I get excited about lots of things like, I want to clean up the ocean of plastics and then
Yep.
make stuff out of it. Houses, whatever, like, and I get so excited about new stuff. But the important thing is going to be, I guess, for the next immediate future, going to the next 10 years, would be sustainability through these activities, because if they're not sustainable, it's just going to be a heap of time put into them, and not, you're just going to be drilling time and money into things that aren't sustainable, which is, we all know, is a bad thing. So,
Hmm.
but again, if you come back to currency, like, they don't have to make a lot of money to be worth a lot as well. And so, to me, the coffee is worth a lot. We can grow that. We can implement financial strategies to make that grow, but the value of it is much higher than what it is on paper, because I know that it's something that people use every day. They've integrated into their lives and they feel good doing it. So, and you can't put a dollar value on that value, but it's valuable because people are coming back. I don't lose customers. The next thing for me is finding new customers, because that will help us grow. So, um, I think long term, we just have to be careful about what we choose to invest our time and cash into, because it is low margin. It's a low margin sport, this
Yeah.
social entrepreneurship. So I just have to be a bit careful. But um, like I say, I'm meeting some great people and so many good ideas come to you, and you just have to be a little bit careful as to which ones to choose. But I'm always open to ideas.
Oh, that's good. I'll get to that at the end. So that because look, unfortunately, we've already got through such a quick period of time. So I'm going to ask what I ask all of my guests, the
Yes.
last question, which is, Andy Fithall, if you're in charge for
Yep.
just one day, what would you do?
What a question. This is unfair in many
It
ways
is unfair.
because
I understand that, but the brain that you've got, I'd love to hear what your thought process is on that. And as I said, it can be anything you want, large, small, and everything in between.
yeah. And so I will preface this by saying the thought of being in charge of anything big to me is very, very daunting. I look at world leaders, I look at state politicians, and the pressure that these people are under, I go, you can have it. I don't want to know
Yep.
about it. But I will say that the most valuable thing that I've picked up in the last, and it's probably to do with my age, let's be honest, you mellow out a bit, but I would say um, I would make it compulsory for people to look in themselves and to ask what makes them happy and to ask them what it is that they're doing that's making them happy, not just what they're doing that they have to do to stay alive. So
Mhm.
a lot of us are doing work that doesn't fulfill us. And again, I'll come back to TGIF. Well, if you're saying TGIF, either you got a big mortgage and you got no choice, or just have a think about it. What makes you happy? Look within. It's a 7 habits philosophy, I guess. Start with you. Look inside. You have to look inside yourself and write down what it is that makes you happy. Because then, at least if you know what that is, you can start working towards that. But if you're going to spend your life just pushing papers or, bean counters for someone else who has a vision and all your vision is turning up on time to work, then look, it's not fulfilling. And yeah, so that's what I would make people do. I would make them look inside themselves and ask what's best
Beautiful
for
answer.
them. Mm.
And that's exactly the reason why I asked those very big existential questions. Before we close up,
Yes.
where can they find you and how can they be part of the Good Machine?
Yeah, well, as far as the Good Machine as a parent, thegoodmachine.com.au is our new very very budget website. Mainly because it doesn't have to be much just yet, but thegoodmachine.com.au. But if you want to get our coffee, you can go to grindhogday.com.au, and you can read about you can purchase coffee there. We've got a great new line coming out to support National Survivors Day coming up for this year. And you can, of course, get the regular blends to support Food Bank. And the other thing is, if you're in small business, one of our Good Machine activities is Ground Level, which is a support network for people in small business, charities and non-for-profits. So you can head to groundlevel.club, and that is, a great place to find out what we do over there and how we help people in small business and non-for-profits and charities.
Brilliant. Andy Fithall, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Exchanges.
Thank you so much, Evan. It's been a pleasure.
Big thank you to Andy and all of his insights into what he has done over that period, how he got into it. Because again, we all went through that COVID period and everything that he now does is clearly the forefront is that entrepreneurial idea from a social perspective. I thought it was an absolute brilliant conversation. To you out there, thank you again for listening. It's a pleasure to bring these exchanges to you. I do really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are watching, listening, or wherever it is, please don't forget, please subscribe and also give us a review if you can. The more and more we can, the bigger and bigger we can grow. If you've also got ideas or guests that you think I should have on, we do have an email. It's exchanges@evanlucas.com.au. But until next week, thank you again for listening. I'll speak to you then.